Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today's lecture. This is one of 11 lectures in the series of economic thinking out of the box. And we are very happy that you're here now. First of all, I want to introduce our group because we are newly founded, and I guess not all of you know us. So we are a small group of 20 people who organize this lecture, but also organizing a reading circle. And we are also currently running for the convent, which will be an election in 2 weeks. And we will give you more information on this on our social media channels. And we will be glad if you can follow us on our social media channels, that you see who is running for the convent. The convent is the highest decision institution or gremium at the university, and it decides on faculty issues. So if you are interested in electing or voting for us, you can follow us on our social media channels. And there's also an international part of our local group. This is called Rethinking Economics International. And there are several groups all over the world. And they are also they also want pluralism in economics. What is a pluralism in economics? This chart can give you a hint. There's the neoclassical economics, which is taught at universities all over the world, which all professors taught in economics. But there are also several other schools like complexity economics or other schools, and they have a different focus on economics. And this is very important to know that. And we as a group want that at the university level, all students know about other schools and know that there are different points of views, and not only the neoclassical economics. And if you are interested in pluralism in economics, there's also a website, Exploring Economics, where you can find more info material and reading and recommendations, which I can highly recommend. And today's lecture is about social tipping dynamics and the transformation to carbon neutral societies. And I will shortly introduce our speaker today. It's Ilona Otto, and she's newly appointed professor at the University of Graz in Austria. She leads a research group which is focusing on social complexity and system transformations. And this is about complex science theory, and they use expert interviews, for example. And it's about processes and intervention in the society which spark rapid social change, which is necessary to radically transform the interactions of human societies with nature and ecosystem service in the next 30 years, which is in the context of climate crisis, very important research. And we are happy that she is with us today, and she will talk for 30 minutes or 20 to 30 minutes. And afterwards there will be time for questions. But at 7 p.m. she has to go to another meeting. So this will be a short lecture today. And now the floor is yours, Ilona.
Yeah, thank you, Philippe, and thank you for inviting me to present my work. And also great to hear that there's this group on plurality economics. And I myself, my background was actually I finished master's studies in sociology and kind of a bit of also management studies. But then I started my PhD in economics, but my training was actually in institutional economics, evolutionary economics, and ecological economics. So it's actually, I came from this kind of other, or this kind of pluralistic economics, and I also, of course, had kind of neoclassical economics lectures, but actually, kind of, I came from the other side. And also, in a way, in the research on climate change, I worked actually in the last 10 years, kind of most of the time with like physicists, hydrologists, and climate scientists. So yeah, I'm kind of used to working with very interdisciplinary methods. And a part of this research that I will present you today, it's also kind of the outcome of in a way, yeah, infecting my mind with all those non-conventional approaches. Okay, so here are the slides. I hope you can see them. Yeah, and I will talk about social tipping dynamics in the transformation to carbon neutral societies, and I will also try to reflect a bit on the economics and kind of the role of economics and social sciences, maybe in general. And if there are some urgent questions of clarification, you are welcome to stop me. But maybe kind of discussion questions we can keep at the end of my lecture. Okay, so I will start. Okay, so first the challenge. So what we are talking about. So those two maps, they are showing the differences in the global warming on average at the end of the century in summer months, and the differences between this kind of well below 2 degrees and 4 degrees world at the end of the century. And here's the temperature scale, and it's kind of very obvious that this 4 degrees world is actually it looks kind of like not really manageable. Yeah. So if you can talk about adaptation in this 2 degrees world, although it seems like kind of very challenging, but if you look at those maps, at the map below, it's actually yeah, it's difficult to imagine actually how we could adapt to a world where some areas are going to warm by 6 or 8 degrees at the end of the century. And it's not only the temperature, but it's also water availability. So in this 2 degrees warmer world, you will have about 20% of less drinking water, and in this 4 degrees warmer world at the end of the century, you will have on average about 50% less drinking water. And again, yeah, if you can think about some ways to adapt to this well below 2 degrees world, like if you look at this map below, it's yeah, it's difficult to imagine how we could adapt to this world. And what I do also in my research, I also look at cascading climate change impact. So climate impacts that cascade beyond one sector, or also beyond specific geographical borders. And there is more and more evidence that that actually this is happening already now, that climate change impact cascade on other geographical areas and sectors through international trade, significant conflicts, and finance and business networks. And just some example from recent history was the impact of heat waves in 2010, and also excess rainfall the same year, that led to a price spike in the cereal prices. That affected at the end the political stability in the Middle East, that led to events that we know as the Arab Spring, but also to those price increases. They also affected the food affordability in the EU. Okay, so the problem is how to solve the climate crisis and how to keep the global warming below 2 degrees. And it's sort of more or less obvious that that's sort of like the standard market forces not forces problem, and there are still a lot of fossil fuel resources underground. So you see, we need other solutions. And what you see on this map, on this figure, we have here the historical changes in the rate of CO2 emissions per year. And this is contrasted with the future scenarios. So this red curve here, hope you can see my pointer, shows this 4 degrees scenario. And the purple curve below shows this below 2 degree or compatible scenario. And of course, one obvious thing is that we are not yet on this purple curve, but although there was some impact, of course, of the corona crisis. So last year, the global emissions actually decreased by 6.5% worldwide, and this is actually the rate of emission reduction that is needed to reach or to limit the global warming well below 2 degrees by the end of the century. Yes, so in other terms, it means halving global emissions by 2030 and getting to zero net emissions by 2050. And per year, it means you would need to reduce emissions 7% every year. So kind of every year, 7% less than in the previous year. Or in other terms, if you imagine what happened last year in the corona pandemic, so it's sort of like having such a situation year after year, yeah? But of course, the question in my work is, can we achieve such rapid social change, but without having such a high degree of human suffering? So in a way, can we achieve such a dramatic social change, but with kind of sustaining human well-being? And of course, those historical changes that they show that such a rapid reduction in the CO2 emissions was achieved for some periods of time, but they were associated with something what we might call social collapse, yeah? Or kind of social crisis situation, or worse in other terms. And the question is how we can get on this curve without such a high degree of human suffering. And it was a question that motivated this work. So kind of the general driving question was about this kind of how to achieve this rapid and non-linear social change. And actually, this is also interesting that if you look at the social sciences in the 20th century, it was, or in the second part of the 20th century, it was predominantly occupied with kind of linear change. Yes, so sort of the assumption was even this famous book, like The End of History, where sort of the assumption was that the capitalist system is kind of like the final state of the development, and sort of like nothing else is going to happen. And sort of, and in a way, and so even if you think about, for instance, econometrics, yeah, and the way how data is analyzed also in economics. So kind of the primary method is the linear regression. Yeah, so it's a linear regression. Yeah, so it detects linear relationships, but there are not so many tools that detect nonlinear changes. Yeah, or this kind of this knowledge of kind of regime shifts or irreversibility, or also positive feedbacks. It's not. It wasn't really in the mainstream of not only economics but also social sciences. and also sort of like if you look at the models that that are most commonly used in economics, they are kind of equilibrium models, yeah. But what actually we are talking here about is actually kind of getting out of equilibrium, and maybe kind of more like evolutionary type of models. Yeah, and sort of like so I did extensive literature review on kind of searching what kind of evidence exists in kind of conceptualizing the kind of rapid social change. And then I got to this notion of social tipping that actually was originally used in social sciences in the 50s in the US in the research on racial segregation. And there was this article that sort of argued that there's kind of tipping point in the neighborhoods. And if you have like more than about 30% of people with the other skin color moving to a certain neighborhood, you start to feel uncomfortable and you move out. So of course now it was the 50s and the US, so sort of like yeah, a bit racial, but still, you know, there was this idea that you might have a threshold, and after you cross this threshold, like things start to happen very quickly. And then I started to kind of follow this notion and search for some evidence and theory that would help to conceptualize such changes. And then actually I got to like from public opinion research, or also research on social norms and also financial markets, and where actually you learn that actually those kind of fast rapid changes are observed in the reality and they happen. And also there's this interesting also experiment from or evidence from behavioral experiments that show that that you need about 25% of a minority to change like practically any kind of social norm, yeah. And if you have kind of committed, sort of like a committed minority, those minorities can change the majority of the population. So then I kind of propose a definition of something what I call social tipping elements. So they are parts of the system that that affect the whole world Earth system and are likely to influence the global greenhouse gas emissions. And also, and then actually this definition of social tipping elements, it's very similar to the definitions of the definition of tipping elements in the climate system. But what is different in social systems is actually this notion of social tipping interventions. So because yeah, because sort of like there are ideas that that human societies can kind of consciously intervene in the system, so they can push it, at least in theory, in some desired direction. So then I proposed this notion of social tipping interventions that are meant to change this kind of landscape and lead to rapid changes in the social tipping elements. The full definition of the notion is available in the paper that is cited here. Exactly, also sort of like the starting point. So I had the definition, then the question was, so what are the those social tipping elements and social tipping interventions that are likely to push the Earth into this kind of rapid transformation pathway and decarbonized, and help to reach the decarbonized state by 2050. And here exactly like a bit more of kind of differentiation, what I mean, like how to differentiate those small and big interventions. And so sort of like the tipping effect is where you have kind of relatively small interventions with a big effect. Okay, and what I did next, I did expert elicitation and also a workshop, expert workshop, and and also we run with my colleagues literature review, and we search for empirical evidence, kind of confirming our findings. And this table presents the results of our research. So we nominated altogether 6 candidates for so-called social tipping elements, and altogether 7 so-called tipping interventions. So tipping interventions are sort of like the interventions that are needed to kind of push those tipping elements into this nonlinear change. And we also kind of try to name the control parameter in the system, also find evidence on the potential to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We looked at kind of what level of social structure we are talking about, and also we try to estimate the time that to trigger the tipping. And so these are the results. So in, at the end, we argued that those rapid changes can happen within the energy production and storage system. And here you need to change in the subsidy programs and decentralized energy generation. Then the human settlements, you need to build more carbon neutral cities. In the financial market, and here the intervention is the divestment movement. Then the system of norms and values. And here you need to recognize the immoral character of fossil fuels. Education system, and here you need more climate education at different levels of public education. And information feedbacks, and here you need emission information disclosure, like for instance, like just a label showing the emissions of different, related to the production of different products and services. And what those different tipping elements have in common is actually that there is this multiple evidence that small small minorities, they can actually change the rest of the rest of the kind of population you are talking about. So a very interesting example is, for instance, the divestment movement or the financial market in general. So here we also did some models showing that you need actually about 9% of financial investors to tip the market. Yes, so in a way you don't need everyone to divest. You need only like a small share of the. I had a small crisis with
no problem.
My kids. Yeah, so there was this multiple evidence of kind of that you need this small minority to change the rest of the society. And this figure is showing the results in a maybe bit more attractive way, and kind of trying to order those different tipping elements and tipping interventions. On the one hand, on the in this kind of social structure layers, and also on different time dimensions. Some changes, they occur at this kind of resource allocation level, where changes can happen very rapidly. However, some other changes, they need more time, yeah? So changes in the level of kind of customs, norms, and religion, where those kind of normative changes, they actually need much more change, much more time, and they are much slower. And sometimes they need either like kind of more than 30 years. But sort of, so you can also say that, why should you care about those kind of slower changes if you can achieve a lot at this kind of rapid change of level? And sort of like, fine, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay, so exactly. So sort of the idea is that if you sort of only focus on those kind of rapid change sort of social structure, or those kind of social structure layers where kind of those changes can occur very rapidly, but you don't take care of those kind of slower system changes, like in a way you will have a like constantly kind of a rebound effect, yeah, because like here changes can happen very rapidly, but they can also very rapidly kind of bounce back, yeah, and that's why you need those kind of changes at those slower system levels, because they kind of stabilize this newly emerging system. Yeah, so for instance, climate education or systems of norms and values, they are very important for kind of stabilizing this kind of newly emerging system. Also infrastructure changes, they're also very important. And maybe some example, like in this kind of level of kind of normative changes. So here the kind of the idea is that once like people will start feeling kind of badly about using fossil fuels, kind of that they will have some kind of moral some moral concerns. This is sort of like, this would be like a sign that the system kind of this newly emerging system kind of stabilized. Yeah. An example like this can be compared actually with the slavery abolition movement. Yes, so so in a way, like if you look at the changes in the number of slaves that were traded internationally at the end of the 18th century, actually it was like a very rapid change, and it was sort of like similar that this change actually started with sort of like moral arguments in the among the British elites, so kind of also very narrow groups. And sort of like there are some historical books that argue that actually those moral concerns kind of led to the slavery abolition movements. Like you had the kind of new technology, like that time the combustion engine that was available at that time, but it wasn't really cheap and wasn't like easy to use. But actually this normative change led to the kind of this widespread slavery abolition movement that also kind of, if you look at the numbers of slaves that were traded internationally, like those numbers like decreased very rapidly. So in a way, this is something maybe similar what we can compare to today. And maybe also finally that you also have interactions with the world climate system. So on the one hand, you have we produce our human societies, they produce anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions and lead to land use changes. But on the other hand, like we have feedbacks from the climate systems. So there is a multiple evidence that environmental disasters, they can act as kind of windows of opportunity when rapid changes are possible. So in a way, after so a good example actually is maybe like the Fukushima disaster, where sort of like environmental changes led to kind of increased consciousness about the risks, like that time related to the nuclear energy use, and then so-called Energiewende was possible in Germany that time. But of course, no. It wasn't just like a moment, but in the history, but also like there were years of kind of social movement, activity, and also like various organizations were active in this field. So but this kind of moment of time was very kind of well used, and sort of like new changes in the law were proposed at that time. So in a way, no, we can imagine that it might be something similar, that those kind of unpredictable disasters, they might work sort of as they might catalyze those changes. In a way, of course, also the corona crisis might be seen as such a window of opportunity, because globally the emissions decreased last year, And also, I think many people realized like how vulnerable we are, and actually what is important in life. Yeah, that actually like health is one of the most important things that we care about. And there are also those interactions of climate change with health issues. Yeah, so there's also evidence that climate change is going to interact with health, or with kind of increased health risks, and various diseases. Yeah, that's basically all. But what I wanted to mention is also at the end is those kind of large inequalities. So it's also something what is not commonly discussed, also in economics. So we kind of tend to look at national averages, also in terms of emissions per person, carbon emissions per person. But actually, it's like a very narrow part of the global population is responsible for disproportionately high emissions, and like about 50% of world population is responsible only for a minor share of historic greenhouse gas emissions. And the problem is, of course, now how to allocate those remaining 40% of the carbon budget up to 1.5 degree. And those large also within national inequalities, I think they will be a part of ongoing debates, and also without addressing those inequality issues, and kind of those social justice issues, we cannot really provide any feasible climate solutions. And it's not only about kind of individual differences, but also if you look at the emissions that are related to the operation of different companies, and firms. Yes, it's a similar picture. It's actually like 20 companies are responsible for about 35% of global CO2 emissions. And of course, no, these are primarily companies in the oil and gas sector, but still, at the end, it's very narrow. It's a very narrow group. Okay, and here's a few words of the conclusions. So in a way, my research is showing that there's no silver bullet for rapid decarbonization. It's more like a silver buckshot is needed. And also kind of what we found out is that technology alone will not lead to deep transformation, like more kind of deeper societal changes are needed. So stuff like values and norms changes are important. And there's this multiple evidence that about 10 to 25% of committed minority can tip the majority. So in a way, those kind of critical minorities are very important. And to recognize them in different areas. So we are talking about like energy producers, energy ministers, teachers, educators, medical doctors, local governments, financial investors, producers, and peer groups. So at the end, it's important to recognize those kind of dimensions of human agency. Final picture, what I mean by human agency. Actually, it's also kind of interesting in the context of economics that most of the time in economics, we focus on everyday individual agency that we have through our consumer choices and preferences. But actually in social sciences, you find that there are also those other dimensions of agency that are less researched, as the strategic and political agency that is needed to change the rules of the system. So like the laws and norms. And also the collective agency, that the agency that you have through engaging in social movements, grassroots and interest organizations. So exactly, so sort of, I think thinking about kind of like more citizens and less consumers as necessary. Thank you, I finish here, and I really apologize about the disruptions. I will stop my slides here, and I'm looking forward to your feedback question.
Thank you so much for your talk. And I think it was no problem that you were out for some minutes.
Thanks.
There are two questions, and I think we will start with Frank's question, Martina.
Yeah, thank you, Ilona, for your presentation. The focus of your work seems to be on carbon emissions. Does your work change if you extend it to biodiversity, land loss, or brittleness of ecosystems? Are there new social tipping elements or just extensions of these 6 you mentioned if you extend it towards more than CO2?
Well, maybe some of the tipping elements that I mentioned could be maybe even identical or similar, but in general, I think it's important to think kind of what kind of system you have in mind and what are the sort of like the system control parameters. Yes, so maybe you talk about biodiversity or land use, or maybe I don't know, diets. This is not. It will probably not be the identical list, although some things might probably overlap. Yeah, and maybe something what I should also add is that that those research results, it's not sort of like the holy list, but it's more like sort of like the candidates that we are able to for which we are able to find the kind of supportive evidence. But it doesn't mean that that there are no other tipping elements. Like for example, recently I exchanged with the health community, and it seems that the health sector might be potentially also this kind of social tipping element, or like an area where rapid changes can occur. But exactly, we at the time when the research was carried out, we could not find some evidence that would support this. So in a way, these are just like a list with candidates, but I would like to encourage more research and also critique. So I'm kind of fully open to this.
Frank, you had also another question. Do you want to post this question also?
Yeah. Thanks for the answer, first of all.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Second question is, you seem to assume that social tipping translates itself to real changes by way of the political system. Does your model make any accommodations for the different political scenarios out there? Talking about like decentral governance, a multipolar system with US, Europe, China in the lead, or global governance system like we see or imagine in Kyoto and Paris. Is your model really focused on the national level, like a national awakening, or does it make it any accommodations for different political scenarios which are out there, government-wise?
So I would say it's like a global model, but maybe like a concrete pathway or tipping pathway in different world regions will look differently. Yes, so I think like what is happening now, that maybe in Germany or in Europe you have kind of stronger political changes, but maybe if you look at the US, you will have maybe kind of changes more kind of occurring through financial markets. And maybe if you think about I know China, there you also maybe well, I hope there will be kind of like, I mean, there will be kind of changes more at this kind of central government level happening. Yes, so in a way, this what I was talking about. It's sort of like a global model or a pathway, but I think you will have also kind of like regional and national pathway that might diverge, or there might be kind of like different kind of the role of different tipping elements might differ. Yes, so sort of like you will have kind of like more diversified changes. I know if I answered your question.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions.
Thank you for your answers. And now there's another question by Sebastian, and I guess he will pose the question by himself. Sebastian?
Yeah, now, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Ilona, for your brief talk. Social tipping points. I have a certain understanding of it, and I would much appreciate a definition of it, because what I saw is lots of top down, and my assumption about social tipping points is something that is happening equally bottom up. You kind of like lean towards it in your last slide that you showed. Yeah, I would just be curious if you could help me understand a bit more the term. Thank you. Not coming from sociology.
Well, it's actually, yeah, I think that well, depends on the system, but those changes I think will not. But or mostly what I meant actually, these are kind of like more bottom up changes, and so in the paper we proposed a definition of tipping elements. So a tipping element, it's a part of the kind of larger socio-economic system, or could be like a subsystem or a sector where rapid changes can occur, and this system has an influence on the global rate of CO2 emissions. Yeah, and those tipping interventions are the interventions that are likely to activate so the contagious dynamics within this system sub-element. Yes, so maybe I think what can illustrate this, what we had in mind, is this kind of contagious character. Yeah, that within each of those candidates for social tipping elements, we could observe that there's this kind of contagious effect. Yeah, that you have like a small change that rapidly spreads to the rest of society. Yeah, or the given population. So an example would be like the divestment movement that I was talking about, that sort of like a small share of investors can actually tip the market. Yeah, and so yeah, according to our model, like you need about like 9% of financial investors to divest, and the rest will follow, because they will be afraid of losing their money. Yeah, so even if they have no environmental concerns, they will divest, because because if you are the last one who invests in an asset that no one wants to buy, then of course you are you are losing value of your shares. Yeah, so that's the kind of idea that that you have this kind of those kind of the social contagions within each of those elements. And even for instance in the, like I was talking about the centralized energy production, and there is research showing that if you look at the rate of adoption of or installation of solar panels, it also has those kind of contagious dynamics. Yeah, and actually solar panels spread in the neighborhoods. Yeah, and there's actually one paper, it's not written by me, by some colleagues, shows that that if you look at the like kind of geographical spread of social panels, and also at the time dimension, it really spread sort of like a virus. Yeah. So this is like the dynamics what I need, and the same with social norms. Yeah, it's again like sort of like if you start feeling kind of uncomfortable when you need to drive a car, like a standard combustion engine car, or if you need to fly, then this is the moment. Yeah, and it also spreads through social groups to other to other kind of like to other groups and members in society. So in a way, this is what I mean, and this is actually kind of happening mostly again bottom up. Although some of the changes I was talking about, they are more at the kind of policy level.
Thank you for your answer. I guess, Sebastian, do you have questions or?
I actually didn't even realize I was still on sound here. No, thank you very much for those explanations. I hope I didn't make any noise here. Okay.
No.
Thank you very much, Ilona, and hope you get back to your little daughter soon. Okay, ciao. Thank you.
Thanks.
And Sarah has a question.
Yeah, I actually have a question that is kind of connected to what you last said about social norms. I was wondering whether, or you already pointed out that changing social norms and habits are crucial for decarbonizing the society. And I was wondering whether this is the reason why we are so slow decarbonizing and why there are, for example, fake news and so much resistance, because we have not changed the norms by now already. And another question also to that topic, where do you see the most important power, more on the individual level or politics? Because sometimes I think politics wouldn't change because they are elected, and politics wouldn't change before individuals or the society would change.
Yeah, so in general, I think, like this, what you are asking about, this kind of this agency structure dynamics, yeah? And so it's like a very long debate in social sciences, like what is the first, like whether like individual action or the social structure. And I think it's where actually it was even written in the recent UN emission gap report that these are like two sides of the same coin, yeah? So you actually need both, yeah? So you need individual change, but you also need the structural change. But to achieve the structural change, you actually need more this kind of collective and strategic agency rather than individual and everyday agency. So in a way, but just by kind of changing what you buy every day in the shop, you will not change the system structure, yeah. So you need sort of like more of those kind of collective and reflexive processes to actually change the law, or the streams of subsidies, or maybe also governments, yeah. This can happen at various levels, yes. So I'm talking about the national politics, but also about like the community politics or local governments, yeah, what is happening at the local level. So if you think first about like this kind of movement of carbon neutral cities, yes, so this is actually happening at the local government level, and it's led by like a few individuals who are sort of like local leaders, and they kind of build a kind of local coalitions and and try to kind of get others on board. And actually, changes at this kind of city level, they can happen quicker than what is happening at the national policy level, yeah, because at the city level, maybe those changes take like 5 to 10 years. And actually, you have more and more cities committing to carbon neutrality. So this is also rapidly increasing kind of social movement around the world. So in a way, you need both. And you, sorry, and the first part of your question was
also regarding social norms, whether the reason that we have not changed social norms is the reason for fake news and things on the
right. Okay. So in a way, I think the marine sphere is very similar. So if you think about those populist groups or also fake news, is again, there are like minorities that change the debate in the mainstream media, yeah, and maybe even like the kind of dominant social norms. So I think so. This is a very similar mechanism that you have very active minorities who kind of dominate social media and maybe also I know before the elections, especially. And in a way, so I think the question is, what can we learn from them? And maybe you need the same in climate activism or climate action in general. So you need those kind of small committed minorities, and in a way it's also happening. And sort of like so even if you feel like what you like and what you dislike on social media, and what you share, and sort of like each of us can be kind of an agent of change here, and also kind of paying attention to those fake news and trying to maybe not discussing with them every point, but sort of like change the dynamics. So for example, what I do, that kind of I consciously use social media and kind of I pay attention to what I like and what I dislike. For example, if I see friends posting something about flying for holidays, then of course I don't give likes to such posts, and also kind of sometimes I comment something, of course, in a kind of friendly way. In a way, if we think of ourselves as those kind of agents of change, and sort of like trying to influence the areas that we can, and where we have the agency, I think this could change those kind of larger societal dynamics.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions.
I think this was the last question. Thank you so much for your talk.